Guys, welcome back to the Master System Club podcast. This is episode 3. Today we're going to be talking all things Brazil with my buddy Kev, who has a full Tec Toy set. I'm fairly sure it's the only one in Europe. Before we get into it, big hello to Kev. So welcome, Kev. How are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Ali.
Yeah, no worries. It's really nice having mates on. It's like the third time I've done it, and it is really just like catching up with buddies down the pub, to be honest. So it's just a good excuse to have a natter for a little while and chat Master System.
Any excuse to chat Master System.
Absolutely. Okay, buddy. So you've got this full Tec Toy set. Tell us a little bit about that to start off with, please, buddy.
Well, it wasn't easy. I probably started off not intending to collect Tec Toy, but as you know yourself, when you sort of collecting, say, the Euro set, you hit a brick wall at some point. So to get that sort of buzz, that hit of collecting, you sort of go off on a tangent, and that's pretty much what I did with Tec Toy games. That's how it started. Probably about 10, 15 years ago, you could buy complete sealed Tec Toy games from Greece for a couple of quid. There was actually a distributor in Greece. I've no idea how it's pronounced because it's in Greek, but there was a Tec Toy distributor in Greece. So lots of games found their way over to Europe via Greece, and you could buy them for a couple of quid, completely sealed. And what they would do, they would open them and put a very basic Greek manual inside, instruction manual, reseal them and put a Greek Sega seal back on them. So that's probably how it started for me, just collecting these, going off on a tangent, collecting these weird and wonderful cardboard box games and games with different artwork, brand new and sealed. It was just a way of getting that hit of a new acquisition when you were waiting for games to complete your Euro set.
That's such a brilliant story. How many games are in the Brazilian Tec Toy library?
So the full set is 244.
Right. Okay.
Most of them we got in Europe. There's about 32 that are exclusive to Brazil. Now, speak to 3 different Tec Toy collectors and they'll give you 3 different numbers. But for me, there's 32 exclusives. And the reason why there's a bit of discrepancy, you'll know yourself that there were 2 games released in Portugal. A Sapo Zoo game, which was, I think it was Sapo Zoo Peluja, and a game box game.
Yeah.
They were released on the Portuguese Purple label by Acro Films. So I don't count them, obviously, as Tec Toy exclusives, but some do.
Yeah, because they came out in the Palem territory as well.
Yeah, and the other ones, of course, are hacks. So things like Geraldinho, that was Teddy Boy. For me, it's a different enough game to class it as a Brazilian exclusive, but some don't. But for me, there's sort of 32 sort of exclusive games. So a lot of Euro collectors who are interested in Tec Toy tend just to be interested in those 32 exclusives. But even that is no mean feat. To get those 32 games, most people give up.
Yeah, I've got limited experience of collecting. I don't know. I've got maybe like 12 or 15, something like that. And I collected them mainly with yourself, of course, and your help. But yeah, it certainly it sorts the boys from the men, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of, like I say, it's something more people do give up on because you really have to be obsessed. You really do. I think most people who collect Master System will tend to move on to another system pretty quickly as soon as they've completed the set. But some of us, we just deep dive into it and we just get obsessed. I know yourself, you're sort of going down the Japanese route now.
Yeah.
But
It
when
keeps
you've done
me in
all
the
that,
game.
yeah. But when you've done that, then what? You've got the Aussie Soft, you've got the Tec Toy. There's enough there to keep you going for a lifetime.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. And for me, it was always about the journey and meeting like-minded people like yourself along the way, and creating stories and memories, and you're collecting them as well as collecting the games. And that for me is kind of what makes collecting a little bit special, really. You've got each game, but you've got the story that goes along with it as to how you got that one. Okay, so tell us a little bit about um, Tec Toy, and who they are, what they're about, why they're only in Brazil, that sort of stuff. Just a bit of history, if you will.
But Tec Toy, they're actually still going now. I think they do electronics now, sort of consumer electronics, mobile phones, things like that. But the reason why they were created is in Brazil, they have a culture of not importing things into the country. So there's a massive import tax for anything that you're importing. So Sega's way around that was to sell the rights to Tec Toy. So because Tec Toy are Brazilian based, it sort of gets around that import tax because all the games were produced in Brazil. And because of the economy in Brazil, with it being, I mean, it's quite an up and coming country now. But back when Master System was out, it was quite a poor country. So where we were sort of moving on towards sort of Mega Drive, Super NES, they were still going quite hard on the Master System, all the way through to, I think it was late 1997. They were still bringing games out, and even in the 2000s, they were bringing out Master System consoles with built-in games. So they were still producing hardware well into the 2000s. So yeah, it was basically it was a way of getting sort of Master System into Brazil while avoiding sort of the import taxes. In a similar way that I think it was Samsung did it in South Korea. Because that had a sort of a closed economy as well. You weren't allowed to import things into South Korea. So they licensed Samsung, and I think their Master System's called the Game Boy.
Interesting. And so Tec Toy, they weren't just a reseller, so to speak. They also ported some of the games from Game Gear, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, so a lot. I think a lot of the exclusives, or the later exclusives, so the blue labels, most, not all, but most of them were Game Gear conversions. So they don't actually play very well on our systems because the Game Gear obviously was a 60 hertz machine with it having its own screen. So when you play them on a 50 hertz machine in Europe, they don't tend to play very well. But a little tip, if you've got the ability to play in 60 hertz, they do actually play a lot better. So if you've got a region mod, or if you've got like a Mega SG, they do actually play half decent in sort of 60 hertz.
I do remember, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and I was trying to test a copy of Street Fighter 2 that I bought, and I couldn't get it to work, and I think I rang you.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And I couldn't actually get it working for love nor money. And I think you said, what are you actually playing it on? So, and it was before I bought the Mega SG. And then I put it in, I was playing it on a Model 1. So I stuck it in a Master System 2, and then it booted up straight away. But I was trying to use like isopropyl, I was cleaning the slot and cleaning the cartridge as best I could, and I couldn't get my head around it. But yeah, eventually got there and realised there because it wouldn't run on a Master System Model 1.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure why that is. I don't know whether it's because the Master System 2 whether it had a different BIOS or whether it, Street Fighter 2 in particular, I think it's one of about 4 games that were 8 meg cartridges. So they actually had, or Tec Toy actually produced a mapper chip just to run Street Fighter 2. I think it was Sitio du Piku Amarello. I think that was one of them. Sonic Blast, Street Fighter 2, and Virtua Fighter Animation. They actually had to make a special mapper chip to run those 8 meg games, because the biggest games prior to that were 4 meg. That's as much as you could get. So they had to make a special mapper chip. Is basically it's like a memory chip. Because there's not enough memory in the Master System to run it, they had to have a memory chip with these bigger games. Like I say, in Europe, the biggest one we had was 4 meg. So they had to actually produce a special mapper chip to run games like Street Fighter 2 on the Master System.
Right, cool. How do you go about buying games from Brazil? Unless you're on a flight every few weeks and you're going over there, which I suspect you don't. How easy is it to sort of get into, or how difficult? And how do you go about buying them?
To be honest with you, if you did get on a plane and go to Brazil, you wouldn't see any. It's not like it is. I mean, I went to CEX at my local CEX recently, and there were 10 Master System games in there. You just would not see that in Brazil. Just to give you some sort of context, if you did a search on eBay for Master System games, you probably get about 3,000 search results.
Yeah.
On their version of eBay, which I think it's called Mercado Livre, you get about 300. And if you take into account the size of Europe and the size of Brazil, they have a tenth of the games available there that we do here. So most games tend to get sold between collectors. So that's the key. You've got to get a third party. Like I said, they do have their version of eBay called Mercado Livre, but it's not open to foreigners. And it's down to the culture. They're very anti-import-export. So they see Mass System and Tec Toy and any sort of natural resource, anything that's made there, they see as their treasures. And they're very, very wary of foreigners buying up rich foreigners buying up their treasures. They want to keep it to themselves. So to that end, you tend to find that when you do buy games, the price to foreigners is much higher than it is to native Brazilians. It's still high anyway to native Brazilians, but it's much higher. They do charge foreigners more.
Right. Okay. I suppose it's who you know, I guess.
I mean that
there's a few bits on Facebook, isn't there, and that. So
yeah,
he communicates me in the groups.
I mean, there's a guy that you know, Marco Pelotti, and he has sort of a trading company called Oldest Cool Games, and you can find him on Facebook and Instagram. Can't recommend this guy enough. He doesn't charge foreigners more, so you get fair prices, and he sells games himself, but he will also work as a mule for you. So if you see games available, he will get them for you. Now, obviously, there's fees involved, and this can make things very expensive. The way that they do things in Brazil, it's mostly done by PayPal. But in Brazil, every digital transaction carries a 6.5% fee. So you can't friends and family doesn't exist. Everything's goods and services. Now, the problem with that is, if you're using a mule, so you see a game on Mercado Livre that you want, you can't buy it because you don't have a Brazilian address. You use a mule to get it for you. So say it's £100 game, your mule buys it for you, so he pays £100. He pays, say, £5 for postage, so it's 105. He then has to pay the PayPal fee, the digital transaction fee of 6.5%. So it's more like £112 now. So when you buy it from him, you then have to pay the PayPal fee again because you're paying him now. So that's another 6.5%. So by the time it's paid for, that £100 games cost you 120. Then you have to have it sent to you, which isn't cheap. It's about £25 a game. and then you have to pay 6.5% tax on that. So the best thing to do is buy in bulk, and a lot of time that's not possible because it's not available. So what I tended to do was I probably only got for 2 or 3 parcels a year and had sort of 20 games at a time sent to me. So it means that you could buy a game now and you might not receive it till June.
Yeah.
It's just something to bear in mind when you go down that route. It's not easy, it's not quick, and it's very expensive.
That's where, when I've bought from overseas, particularly Brazil, I've got quite fortunate meeting yourself, and we've shared the postage and stuff, and it's actually only been a few quid on top, really, because you're buying lots and lots of games rather than just 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's worked really well. Certainly for me and you, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the other tip I'd give you, what I've done just to help prepare for postage, really. There are certain games amongst the exclusive games that you can pick up fairly cheap in Brazil, even with all the fees and the postage. You can pick them up relatively cheap and sell them on here. Now, you used to be able to do that with quite a few games, but prices have gone up so far in Brazil now that a lot of the games now are more expensive there than they are here.
Yeah.
Even though it's a poorer country, the economy is emerging, there's a lot more money around, so there's more competition in Brazil now. But there is still 1 or 2 games that you can pick up that will help you offset the cost of things like postage. Things like FIFA. You can pick up a copy of FIFA for £30 and sell it for 70 here. So that helps you offset the cost of postage, like I say.
Yeah, it's sensible as well. What are your, in terms of these 244 games that you've got on your shelf, so to speak? What are your sort of favourite memories? Have you got any that have come with particular stories with them when you've collected them, or were there any that were a particular challenge to get hold of?
Most of them are, to be honest with you. I mean, if you think about a cheap game in Europe, things like the Ninja World Grand Prix, a couple of pound out there, £2-3. Even if you go into a retro game shop, you're not going to pay more than £4. They're cheap games, things like Great Volley, California games. They start about £15. So the cheap games, they're about £15 a pop. When you get to the expensive games, you're getting into the thousands, literally thousands of pounds. Something like Global Defense. I mean, the top 2 rarest games in Brazil, I've got cart only because I just wouldn't. A, you can't find them, and B, the cost, it's just horrendous. I mean, the top 2 games, Global Defense, if you could find a copy, that'd cost you about £2.5 grand. Power Strike, if you could find a copy of that, you're looking at about £1,500 plus. So it can be really difficult, but you get lucky. So I mean, I remember, I think it was yourself who sent me a link to a box and manual only of Power Strike 2, the Tec Toy version, and it was in Scotland. Now I had the cart, I had it right. So I bought that for £50. With the cart, I think the cart cost me 70, so that was 120. That's £450 game, that. So there's a lot of games in Europe that are a lot cheaper here than they are over there, and you wouldn't believe. I mean, like a copy of the Ninja in Europe. I know you bought a copy.
I do.
I bought a copy from Germany for £50. In Brazil, if you could find one, it's £150, £200 game.
Yeah. I remember I saw one sell for about double that as well a year or 2 ago. So I know it's quite difficult to find.
Sure. So this, I mean, if you are thinking, I mean, you'd have to be mad to do it these days. But if you were thinking about going down the Tec Toy route, first thing to do is you're not going to get an app where you can keep track of your games. It's just not going to exist for Tec Toy stuff. So you're going to have to do your own spreadsheet. There's a site called Tec Toy Wiki. It's in Portuguese, but Google will translate it for you. So if you copy all that down on a spreadsheet, you want to research all the prices really before you start buying, because if you're unaware, you're going to be buying games for, I mean, things like Buggy Run here, I think it's about £400 game now, something like that, Buggy Run.
Yeah, ballpark, yeah, sure.
In
Maybe
Brazil,
more.
it's £100. So it's a quarter of the price in Brazil, because the rarity, it's all different. So if you were a new collector to Tec Toy and you saw Buggy Run for £300, you might snap that up, not knowing it's actually cheaper in Brazil. So the best thing to
Same
do,
for Masters of Combat, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, again, that's £100 game in Brazil, but over here, I've seen that go for over £700. So you really need to do your homework and find out prices. I mean, that's easier said than done, because even things like websites like Mercado Libre, I'd say I've only ever seen a third of the library on Mercado Libre. There's games that just never ever show up. But there is a WhatsApp group. I know you're a member of it too. It roughly translates as No Misery, and it's a Brazilian WhatsApp group where people who are looking to buy and sell, sort of trade and buy and sell on the group. Now, again, it's the agriculture in Brazil. They're a bit anti-foreigner buying things, so I tend not to converse on that group. I just use it to keep an eye on prices, and if there was anything I wanted to buy, I'd ask my third-party marker to buy it for me.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I'm still after a copy of Sonic Blast at some point, but I did I did almost get a copy once, and I said, "Oh, just see if the seller will do it for a tenner cheaper," and the seller actually agreed. And I was like, "Right, I'll have." And just as I replied back, "I'll have it," he said, "I'm really sorry, it's already gone." So yeah. I shouldn't have haggled. I should have just paid the.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You don't know the rarity of these things, so it's best to sort of get an idea of on the WhatsApp group especially, you'll see things that continually get relisted, but then you get other things that have gone straight away. Even though they're silly money, they've gone straight away. So you really need to find out what's rare and what's not, so you know when to pull the trigger and when to wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you play many of the? I mean, I know you sort of collect for a few other things as well, like Amstrad and stuff. That you've just sort of gone into the last sort of year or so. But do you play many of the Brazilian games in particular? And if so, do you have any favourites?
No, like I say, they don't play brilliantly. They're half playable in 60 hertz if you can put them on 60 hertz. But many of them games you've played on things like Mega Drive, and they're a lot more playable. For me, Master System collecting, it was just that. It was collecting, and it was nostalgia. It was a trip down memory lane, really, and all the things that you wanted as a kid. And then I suppose it just goes on from the things that you never even saw as a kid, like the North American games and the Brazilian exclusives. It's just becomes all consuming.
Fair enough. Yeah. What else, other than the games themselves, what else have you bought or collected that is Brazilian or Tec Toy?
Well, I tried to stay away from them really, just because the games are so expensive and they take up a lot of your funds. But there is a few things. They did a Sega Club newsletter. Obviously, it's all in Portuguese, so you can't read it. You're just looking at the pictures and sort of the merchandise on there.
Yeah.
I think they did about 15 of those. That was like a monthly thing. And there's also, they used to sell figures in the toy shops from certain Master System games. So there's an exclusive one called TV Colosso. I think that was a hack, but I'm not sure which one of. And they did the figures from I think it was a cartoon as well. What else did they do? Mortal Kombat. So they did all the little Mortal Kombat figurines. And they're in these plastic tubs in places like Toys R Us. And you just buy one out of the tub. I've managed to get complete tubs. Sonic was the other one. So Sonic, Mortal Kombat, and TV Colossal. So they were doing sort of, or Tec Toy were doing, branching out into other things, other toys.
Ah, cool. In terms of when collecting, what was the trickiest game to get hold of? What was it? The ones that you collected towards the end, or was there some in the middle that was particularly tricky?
Yeah, when I finished collecting, I bought about 10 games at once. And what had happened is Marco had tipped me off to a really big collector who was selling up. So luckily I got first dibs on these 10 games. And I knew it was now or never, because I'd never, in 10 years of collecting Tec Toy, I'd never seen these games. I'd never even seen pictures of them. So it was literally all my savings went, because it was now, I was even going to do it now, I was never going to be able to complete the set. And it was games like Impossible Mission, Alien Syndrome, what else was there? Aerial Assault. Trying to remember now what they were. Dragon Maze, aka Bubble Bobble. That's a rare one. Psychic World, Zillion, Action Fighter, and Operation Wolf. And they're pretty much top 10 rares. You just thought, see, if you do see them, they're always battered. The thing with Tec Toy games, there was a culture in Brazil. They didn't keep everything. They just kept the cartridge, and that's why complete Tec Toy games are they're near impossible to find. And I think a lot had to do with the climate and the quality of materials that they used.
Yeah.
Think about a hot, humid climate, and you've got a game manual. It gets moist, it gets damp, it gets mold on it. The staples that they used were galvanized, they're quite cheap staples. So they tended to rust, and that rust ate away at the paper. So you just ended up with this moldy piece of paper with two holes in it where the staple used to be. So they got thrown in the bin. And with the boxes, the covers around the boxes where the insert goes into, they tended to expand with the heat and then contract at night when it was cold. So they would crease the insert up, and moisture would get in, and they just turned to mush. So a lot of them just got thrown in the bin too. So the majority of Tec Toy games that you'll see for sale in Brazil tend to be just cart only, and that's why the prices are just ridiculously high for complete games. I mean, if you do see a game in Europe that's Tec Toy, they tend to be much, much better condition than what you could get from Brazil. So if you are looking, Europe is your best bet condition-wise. But it's one of the things you have to accept. If you're going to go down the Tec Toy route, you're not going to get everything complete, and you're not going to get everything in good condition. It's just not going to be possible.
Yeah. With this set of yours, then, how do you go about maintaining it all and keeping it all in nice condition? Have you got any tips in particular for the Brazilian games that might not have been made of quite the same materials that we're used to over here, to keep them all in nice condition?
Yeah, what the Brazilian collectors do, because of the climate, they tend to actually dissect the games. They take them to bits and store them in different places. So the cartridges, they'll put in a drawer. The boxes, they'll keep separately. They'll keep it somewhere that maintains a constant temperature where it's cool, and it stops the box or the cover around the box contract it, and you get that sort of ripple effect. And they're trying to stop that, so they'll put it somewhere that's cool. With the inserts, they will tend to put it in like a pack of magazines to keep them flat, and it keeps the moisture off them. So but the problem with that is, over time, things get lost. So when the time comes to sell and put everything back together, they might have lost the manual or they've lost an insert. So it can be really difficult. That's why it's another reason it's so difficult to find these games complete. Another thing that they do with the manual, they tend to take the staples out to stop them rotting and just keep them in an airtight bag to stop oxygen getting to them. And it sounds quite drastic taking the staples out, but as long as you put them back in slowly by hand, it's actually really easy to do. I actually did that with my European set and North American sets because I had noticed after like 35 years, a lot of them had started going. But with the Tec Toy games, especially because the staples weren't galvanised, it's an absolute must. You must take staples out. Otherwise, in a few years, you just end up with a couple of rotten staples with 2 big holes in your manuals.
Yeah, yeah. I remember some of the ones I've bought. They were starting to go already, and you see nasty brown stains on your manual in the middle page or whatever where they've been. And it's not that they've got overly wet, but just the moisture in air has got to them. You know. So, okay, cool. How much do you think you've paid to get this complete set?
It's really difficult to quantify because, like I say, I was collecting games early on for literally a couple of quid. It's not until sort of the end that I really paid out big, and it literally took all my savings to sort of finish the set. I think if you was going to do it now, it'd be at least 30 grand to get all 240 games. But that's fully complete. But I don't think you'd spend that just because you won't get them all fully complete. I mean, I've been quite lucky that I've only got 2 that aren't fully complete, which are the sort of 2 really big hitters. But I think for most collectors, they'd be more interested in the exclusives rather than the full sort of set. And I think if you were looking at doing the sort of 32 Tec Toy exclusives by today's prices, you'd be looking at about 7 grand, which is, I mean, I don't know what a full Euro set costs now. Is it about 10 to 12?
It's got to be about that sort of figure, isn't it, in this market?
So 7 just for the 32 exclusives. That's quite a big chunk. That. So
yeah,
put quite a few people off. But I mean, just picking 2 of those games out, the 2 Mickey Mouse games, Legend of Illusion and Mickey's Ultimate Challenge. If you could find a copy complete, you'd be looking at about £1,200 for each of those.
Yeah, I knew they're pretty tricky to find because they're quite sought after.
Yeah, I mean,
collectors just don't sell them.
No, yeah, I mean that's Brazilian prices. That's what I've seen them go for in Brazil. Like I say, foreigners tend to get charged more. So if you were going to pick up those from Brazil, you're probably looking at about £1,400. I was lucky I did it when I did. I probably paid for those 2 £180 each, something like that.
Yeah, just timing, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, I mean,
I bet when you got them for that, you probably thought, "Blimey, that's a lot."
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money, but such as the addiction was, I just had to have them.
yeah, I know that one. Cool. Okay, so now you've finished up with the set. If you were to pick out, I suppose the sort of top 3 most expensive ones in terms of value, would I don't know if I know the 2 Mickey Mouse ones are certainly not cheap, but are they the most valuable?
Out of the exclusives, they are, but overall for the Tec Toy set, no. I mean, the rarest game is Global Defense. Now, I think there's only about 4 or 5 copies of that, and just to put it into context, that
anyway, in the like known, there's only 4 or 5 known copies.
Yeah, so it's the first release, which was the cardboard games. So Global Defense, I think it was only released in cardboard, because a lot of them were released multi-format. So there's 6 different box types in Brazil. You've got cardboard, you've got plastic box, large white squares, you've got plastic box, small white squares, you've got mixed, you've got the later blue labels, and then you've got the others, which are like the multi-cart games and the packing game 20 and 1. So Global Defence was only brought out on the cardboard format. Now, I'm pretty sure it wasn't meant for release. I don't think it got a full release. I think it is a similar story to, do you know, the SMS2 variants of like Sonic 2, Batman Returns, was it Tasmania and Home Alone?
There's a helicopter one as well, isn't there? I think James
Air Rescue.
Air Rescue, that's the one.
I don't believe that's an SMS2 variant though.
Right. Oh, okay.
Re-release copy. But yeah, trying to find a copy of Global Defence, it would be easier to find Sonic 2 SMS2 variant.
Right. Blimey.
That's where it is. But you'd be looking about $2.5 to $3 grand for Global Defence if you could ever find one. I was lucky enough to get a cartridge only. So yeah. I think the next one down would be Power Strike. I've never seen a copy of. I've seen quite a few copies, but I've never seen one for sale. But I guess you pay about $1.5 grand for that. Again, I've got that cart only. That's they're the only 2 games
that you've got cart only because it's just so rare.
Yeah. But unlike with our games in Europe, some of the games came with sort of catalogues and epilepsy warning sheets. All of the games came with catalogues and a service sheet, which was basically a list of Tec Toy assistant services, where if you had any problems with your hardware or software, you could take them to these outlets and they would check them over for you and give you a replacement if necessary. So every single Tec Toy game came with this service sheet, and there's like 4 different types. There's like a black one, a green one, a blue one, I think a red or orange one. And every single game came with a catalogue. But each specific game had a specific service sheet and catalogue. On top of that, on the back of each manual and on the back page, there's a serial sticker, and that directly correlates to inside the cartridge. There should be a serial sticker inside the cartridge as well. So when the service department would open up the back of the cartridge, the service sticker would be in there, and they would use that to activate the warranty. Now, the collectors in Brazil, for it to be fully complete, it has to have the service sheet, the manual, cartridge, the game catalogue, and the numbers have to match. If the numbers don't match, it devalues it. Now, for European collectors, it's not so much of an issue. Most collectors don't even know about it, but it is a good way of getting prices down. In Brazil, they expect to haggle. So if you know your prices, you know sort of what wiggle room there is sort of to haggle. So never accept the first offer. Always haggle, and it's a really good tool. Does it have the catalogue? Does it have the service sheet?
And that's just a sticker that's inside the cartridge that matches the sticker on the back page of the manual.
Yeah, if they don't match, then that manual's not original to that game. Now, like I say, a lot of collectors over the years, they'll put the manuals in different places to the cartridges, to the boxes, to the inserts, and a lot go missing. And some cartridges go missing and they find them out. So it's really easy in Brazil to find manuals on their own. It's not so easy in Europe, but you'll see a lot of manuals get sold on their own. So you'll get sort of a Frankenstein of games. Now, for us in Europe, it's not an issue, but it's a really good way to get the prices down. It's a really good way to haggle.
Ah, cool. Yeah, that's, I mean, I think I've not actually checked any of mine, but most of them have got the manuals, but whether they're the original manuals, I'm certainly not bothered. But yeah, I've not actually checked. Right, okay. I know you and I have had this conversation briefly before. If there were collectors out there going for the full world set for the Master System, I can't remember how many it is. Is it 80 something? I can't remember. I think it's about 80 different games overall for the world set. But how many of those would be Brazilian then? Is that the 32 that you mentioned that are unique ROMs?
Yeah, again, it can be a bit. It's open to interpretation. What is a unique ROM? Something like Fantasy Star, for instance, in Brazil, it's Portuguese, so it's Portuguese language. So the ROM is different.
It's technically, although it's the same game, right? Okay.
Game, but I suppose
how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
Exactly. This is the thing. Even something like, I think it's Rainbow Islands. In Europe, we had a bug in the game. So when you got to like a level 120, it would just revert back to the title screen.
Right.
So you couldn't actually complete that game. No, they
like
fixed
kill screen, so to speak.
Yeah. But they fixed it in the Tec Toy version. So that, in effect, is a different ROM. I think, for me, that's going a bit too far.
Yeah, me too, probably.
Yeah, I think it's just the 32. Yeah, I think it's just the 32 exclusives and hacks for the full world set. I mean, it's not the full world set. There's not a lot of extra games on top of the PAL. There's 4-pack all action, but that was from HES in Australia, so it wasn't an official game. So you don't actually need that for a full world set.
I think it was 80 odd on top of the 269. I can't remember. I'm sure I'd looked it up somewhere, but it was so many on top of the 269. Might not have been 80 then, but fair to say then, those 32 make up a fairly big chunk on top of the 269, and then you've got a few on the Japanese Mark III, of course.
Yeah. And then is it the Chinese version of Mahjong or the Hong Kong version of
Hong Kong version of Mahjong? Yeah. So, yeah.
Even the North American exclusives, things like James Buster Douglas,
of course, and Elf and stuff like that. So yeah, they soon tally up, don't they?
It's probably, I'd probably say it's probably not possible. If you were starting afresh now, if you just completed a Euro set and you were going after them, I don't think it'd be possible to do it these days.
No, I don't think I'll be. I mean, 12 or 1400 quid per game for them Mickey Mouse games. I don't think, I don't have, my pockets aren't deep enough. So what are you doing with yourself now then, buddy? Now, you've got your set, you've done a lot of Master System over the last 10 or 15 years. So you are looking at completing, trying to think of the Amstrad stuff that you've been collecting recently.
Yeah, so before I had the Master System, I had a CPC 464, and the only games I could afford back then were the budget games. So there's two main budget labels, Codemasters and Hit Squad. So I've nearly finished the Hit Squad collection. I'm going all in for the Codemasters set. And apart from that, I've had a PS4 for a few years and never really played it. So I actually started playing modern games like Red Dead Redemption 2.
It's a great game.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've missed out. I think the thing is with collecting these days, it's just too easy. You got to spare 5 minutes at work. You're on eBay. You're on the WhatsApp groups and people are selling stuff, or you're on Facebook Messenger and people. It's just too easy to collect. So I tend to use my spare time for playing games now rather than collecting them. I think I've just got to that point now where, as amazing as it's been, I think the memories of things like road trips with people like yourself, going buying games and the people that you meet, I think that's probably been the highlight of collecting rather than the games themselves. So although I'm keeping my Tec Toy set, partly because it was so difficult to do, and as far as I know, I'm the only person in Europe who's ever done it. It's such an achievement. I think the hardest things to come by are often the most rewarding. So that's why I'm keeping the Tec Toy set, but I've decided to sell everything else, as you know, everything else Master System, the full PAL set, the full North American set, the full Japanese set. the full worldwide set, apart from the Tec Toy stuff. Because it's just boxes on shelves at the end of the day, and I've already made the contacts. You know that I've already made a lot of friends. We're in contact every day, so there isn't really any need now to sort of be collecting anymore. And having the extra money, feels like being a millionaire all of a sudden. That's not selling; that's just not buying.
Yeah, sure. Buddy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We're about bang on for 45 minutes there. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or any other parting pieces of wisdom or nuggets?
Well, no, I mean, I could go on for another hour, honestly. Get back on. But yeah, I'd just say, if you are serious about going down a Tec Toy route, even if it's just the Tec Toy exclusives you want, please look up Oldest Cool Games. Mark Uplotti is a really good guy. Doesn't charge any more to phoners. He's a really honest guy. He'll really help you out. Find him on Instagram. Find him on Facebook. And I'm sure he'll look after you.
Fantastic. Kev, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ollie.
And that's us done, guys. So that's episode 3 of Master System Club. I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to get in touch with Kev or look him up, he's also on Instagram. I'll put a little link to that in the description below. But if you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. I try to put new content out every single week, for the most part, all Master System related. So yeah, guys, thank you ever so much. I will see you again soon.